What if Hitler had been assassinated in 1943? During World War II, there were multiple attempts on Hitler's life. None of them were successful, but if any had been, it would have changed the outcome of the war and the impact it had on Europe over the coming decades. In 1944, Operation Valkyrie was the most successful attempt, as the bomb used did actually explode and Hitler was injured, albeit not badly. But one of the key instigators of the plot had also made an attempt on Hitler's life just 1 year earlier that, had it succeeded, could have changed the course of history. General Henning Von Tresckow was a Prussian officer who had long been opposed to Hitler. Described by historian Peter Hoffmann as a fair, just, and hard-working man, Tresckow had been disillusioned with the regime for some time and was horrified at the treatment of Jewish citizens, calling the entire German government barbaric. In 1941, he was already working to spread the resistance across Europe from east to west, and when he was sent to the Eastern Front, Tresckow saw the opportunity to appoint Fabian von Schlappendorf as his aide-de-camp, as he was a trusted friend and would help develop his plans for a coup. But the actual attempt did not occur until 2 years later in March 1943. Initially, Tresckow and Schlappendorf arranged for a British-made bomb disguised as bottles of brandy to find itself on a flight that Hitler was taking on March 13th. It was set to explode in midair, but unfortunately, the detonator failed to go off in the cold hold of the plane. Undeterred, they launched a second attempt on March 21st in Berlin. This time, it was to be a suicide mission, and Chief of Intelligence Colonel Freiherr von Gersdorf was the willing sacrifice, seeing this as an opportunity not only to kill Hitler, but to take Göring, Himmler, and Keitel, all prominent Nazi officers, with him. Gersdorf was to stay as close to Hitler as possible while the Führer examined an exhibition of captured Russian war trophies, with the bombs expected to explode around 15 to 20 minutes into the tour. But Hitler rushed through the exhibit in just 8 to 10 minutes, removing the possibility of Gersdorf heroically sacrificing himself and ending the Nazi regime 2 years early. If it had succeeded, though, there are two things that were likely to have happened. Confusion, followed by Germany's surrender, or a new Nazi head of state would have been appointed. The first is the most likely. By 1943, it was only the most fanatical of Hitler's Nazis who were still clinging to hope of a German victory. William Shirer, the famous Nazi historian, pinpoints the moment the Third Reich was doomed as just 1 month before the assassination attempt. The combination of the Axis defeat at the Battle of Stalingrad, which was officially announced on February 3rd, and the El Alamein and British-American landings in North Africa marked the turning point of World War II and the moment, in hindsight, where Nazism failed. When the news spread throughout Germany, it's most likely that with the top Nazis gone, the Wehrmacht, under the leadership of Tresckow, would have seized control of the country and surrendered to the Allied forces. And it would have had to be an unconditional surrender, rather than a ceasefire or armistice as in World War I, because just 2 months earlier, on January 24th, President Roosevelt had announced at the Casablanca Conference that the Allies would accept only that and nothing else from Germany. If there had been a turning point for a ceasefire, it would have been before Pearl Harbor and when the U.S. entered the war. Historian Wheeler suggests this would not be a problem for German generals of the Wehrmacht, who, recognizing the war was lost, and who had in fact just agreed to a similar proposal with the Russians. Assuming the generals were able to overcome the fanatical Nazis that remained, a task that would have been easier if both Göring and Himmler had died alongside Hitler, then not much would have actually changed at the end of the war. The Yalta Conference, where land division was decided between the US, Great Britain, France, and the Soviets, would have gone much the same way, as Stalin had no intention of holding up his end of the deals that he agreed to at the conference. The other possibility, however, is far more troubling for Germany. If, somehow, Heinrich Himmler had survived the bomb that killed Hitler, it is most likely he would have been appointed as the new head of the Third Reich. Not only was he head of the SS, but he also oversaw the entire police organization of the regime and was next only to Hitler in significance, holding power over both 80 million Germans and twice as many conquered people. He was in prime position and the most likely Nazi to succeed Hitler at this point in time. Other major Nazis who could have taken the position, like Reinhard Heydrich or Hermann Göring, were no longer contenders. Heydrich had been assassinated a year earlier in Prague, and Göring, despite a 1941 decree that he would be head of state, had long since fallen out of favor thanks to a string of defeats and broken promises in his handling of the Luftwaffe and the Battle of Stalingrad. Goebbels, a man as fanatical as Hitler himself, was better suited to the position of Chancellor and head of propaganda, already having carved out a solid niche for himself in the Third Reich. Although there were other Nazis, arguably none were so influential and powerful as Himmler, leaving him as the most likely candidate. He despised Jewish people and cared as little for the Slavish prisoners as Hitler did, and so would have only intensified efforts to kill them or utilize them in order to advance the Nazi regime. This is clearly displayed in the Posen speeches Himmler gave to the SS in October 1943, where he clearly stated his intention to use Russian prisoners as slave labor, only acknowledging the string of deaths in POW camps as deplorable by reason of the loss of labor. In the same speeches, Himmler refers to the extermination of the Jewish race, and his contempt is clear by the forceful nature of the speech. Ranting on about the moral duty of the SS to exterminate them shows that he would have pushed for this all the more as leader, believing the blight of the Jewish to be the reason for any conflict or issues within Germany itself. Himmler, alongside Hitler and Heydrich, was the chief architect of the final solution, seeing Jewish people as little more than a population to be exterminated for the good of the Third Reich. The death camps and systematic rooting out of Jewish people from society were most likely Himmler's contribution, and he would have exhausted every avenue of persecution, utilizing the Wehrmacht where he could to help further the SS goal. It was in doing so that he truly believed that Germanic people would be able to order and control the whole of Europe, leading them into a glorious future. In many ways, Himmler had his own version of the war, and without Hitler, he would have been free to see it out. He had already turned ghettos into concentration camps, and according to historian Breitman, became obsessed with the need to, quote, rid himself of the Jews. He would have seen his plans go into effect after spending 1943 building up his own influence and bureaucracy and planning for the occupation of countries where he depleted the native population in order for Germanic people to colonize the area to create a healthy new Aryan generation. Elsewhere, Mussolini had been defeated and was in hiding, with Himmler expending every effort to find him, while also trying to keep everything together on the home front and taking a newfound interest in scientific discoveries like the V-2 rocket that he believed would have helped further his goals. All of this suggests that under Himmler, the V-2 rockets would have been used to an even greater degree in 1944, leading to far more civilian deaths. But by the time he took power, the writing was already on the wall. As Himmler became more and more internalized, convinced the eradication of the Jewish people and building up of influence from within would have been enough to save him, the Allies' sheer manpower and huge logistical advantage grew until the outcome was inevitable. Himmler would have had no choice but to finally capitulate to the Allies, much in the same way it played out in reality, but with countless extra victims of the Nazi regime. Fundamentally, by 1943, the end of the war was already written. Under another's leadership, it may have taken a different path to the finish line, but either way, Germany's fate was already sealed.